Today, we become legends.
Today's Titan Talk had a fairly large balance hotfix, some early looks at the new Wandering Market collection, discussions around matchmaking and Smite spin-off games, and more. So without further ado, let's jump into the recap. First up, we have the fairly sizable balance hotfix that went live yesterday with some god and item nerfs. For items, Soul Reaver's difference in max HP scaling has been nerfed from 10% to 8%, which is good in my opinion. This item was doing insane amounts of damage and really stopping the max health builds from doing much for tanks. Sunbeam Bolt has also been nerfed, so it now only does 1/4 damage to structures and bosses, down from 1/2 before, and also deals that reduced damage to titans now, where it was doing full damage to titans before. This is mostly to address the split pushing controversy and high level play that's been going on recently if you're a bit confused about this change. Moving on to gods though, first up, Aspect Agni is getting a couple of nerfs, thank god. His ultimate is getting a base damage nerf and a 2-second cooldown increase with the Aspect on, which I think is good. The main problem with Aspect Agni is that he deals solid ability damage while also shredding you with auto attack, so taking that down a bit should help. Princess Bari is getting a shift to once again push her towards an intelligence build if you want ability damage from her, with the passive granting more intelligence. The 1 strength scaling has been nerfed, the 2 strength scaling has also been nerfed, but the int scaling has been buffed, and the ultimate is just getting a straight up nerf. Going from 100 seconds to 110 seconds cooldown, the slow has been halved, and the Mystic Surge duration goes from 10 seconds to 7 seconds. Good changes overall, I think. She definitely needed some nerfs, and incentivizing an int build if you want to deal high ability damage is good, so you can't just go straight into strength and ability damage and have hard hitting autos at the same time. There's a bit more of a decision to be made there now. Guan Yu is also getting some changes. Firstly, his bonus healing from the aspect on the 1 is being nerfed, as well as the intelligence scaling on his 3 with the aspect. While base Guan is getting more of a shift, with the int scaling on his heal going down and the 3 getting more base damage and strength scaling, but less int damage scaling and less int scaling on the protection stolen. Again, pretty good changes, I would say. The healing was definitely in need of a nerf in both forms of Guan Yu in my opinion, and taking down his int scaling makes sense given that's how he's being built 95% of the time, and you don't really see much else from Guan. He's in theory a very flexible god, but his int scalings are just so high right now. Kali is also getting some nerfs in this patch, with her 1 now applying 2 rupture stacks instead of 3 and a 1-second cooldown increase. You can still get 5 rupture stacks by hitting your 1 plus the full 2, but this will make it harder to get full stacks in other cases, like needing 1 extra auto attack before you 3 if you aren't using the 2 to get rupture stacks. Speaking of the 3 though, this also got pretty heavily nerfed, with the strength and int scaling on both the base damage and bonus rupture damage going down across the board, as well as a 1-second cooldown increase. Pretty good changes, I think, especially nerfing Incense, as that ability is just nuts in Smite 2, considering it deals damage, stuns, and gives a ton of free stats while being basically unmissable. I do think they might need to take a look at Shredder Kali in the future, though, as with all these changes to nerf in Kali, people are already starting to change to Shredder Kali in my experience, and that's also probably too strong, so they might need to look at that in future balance patches. But finally, for this nerf patch, we have Pele getting some changes as well, with her 2 strength scaling going down by 10% and her amped 3 strength scaling going down by 5%. This might seem a bit out of left field, but personally I have seen Pele's doing very well in my games, even if she isn't a super popular meta pick right now. Hon also did mention on the show that they are keeping an eye on strength builds, especially ability-based strength junglers at the moment, as they might be underperforming a bit, which I definitely think is the case in my experience. ADC and mid builds have been dominating the game for a few patches now, and tank builds got significant buffs in OB10, but jungle has really just got nothing over the last few patches, and it has been noticeable, for me at least, that strength ability-based junglers feel like the weakest archetype in the game at the moment. No changes in this patch, but they said they're keeping an eye on them and want to let the meta settle a little bit before they start making any sweeping changes to ability strength, but we might expect some changes in that regard for like OB11. But that's it for the balance patch that released yesterday. Let's move on to a few extra things that were mentioned in this show before we get into the Q&A section. First up, ranked rewards started rolling out yesterday, and they said they're going to roll out in waves from the top rank downwards. Not sure how far they are into that at this point, but I do have my masters frame right now, so if you're at one of the lower ranks, let people know in the comments if you've got yours or if you think they're still rolling out right now. Especially if you're silver, let everyone know, because that's the last frame that should roll out. 2x Worshippers is also live in the game right now and will run over the long weekend until Monday, so if you want to grind out some Ascension passes or stars on your mains, now's the time. Next up, the new Wandering Market was teased on the show, which is pretty cool. Kilgoon started by mentioning that the very strict themes for battle passes or Wandering Markets, like the previous one with the maid skins, tend to not do so great, as it relies on players loving the theme or they won't buy it at all. Whereas more loose themes have a higher chance of players liking at least something from the collection. The theme for this one is Spellbound Worlds, and it will be a standard full-size collection, of course, not a traveler market. They mentioned that the first page has a Hunbat skin, but that wasn't ready to show today, but they did show the other 3 skins on the premium pages. The first of which is Magic Mischief Merlin, which looks pretty dope in my opinion. Sir Crocus Bacchus is up next, which is a bit more of a trolly fun skin, and this one does have a VXG where he hops along as he runs, which sounds hilarious. And finally, we have Shattered Vision Amaterasu. Just kidding, this skin is for Princess Barry and is much more of a traditional high fantasy skin, and this one looks sick in my opinion. Big shame I don't play Barry though. They just showed the card arts for the skins on the show. We'll get to see them in game on Wednesday's show next week alongside everything else coming in OB11, but just going off of the card arts, this seems like it will be the best Wandering market yet for me. Of course, it's all very subjective on if you like the skins or not, but they look pretty cool for me. But that's it for all the spoilers. Let's move into the Q&A section of the show. So some people in chat were asking about Max, aka Innocent Rabbit's departure from the company and how that might affect matchmaking, as he was the lead designer on matchmaking. They basically said that Max's departure was for more personal reasons, as he wanted a more in-person role and he was always working remote from Canada at Hi-Rez. They did mention that the engineer that works on the actual matchmaking stuff is still with Hi-Rez and they will continue to work on matchmaking, of course. Max also said on Twitter that he's documented a lot of the stuff he was working on so others at the company can pick up where he left off, which is good. Following on from that, someone asked if any progress has been made on role-based SR and matchmaking lately, and Kilgoon seemed to basically say it's something they're thinking about and could do in the future, but they aren't actually working on it right now. Because the current matchmaking system makes a match before assigning anyone's roles, it will require a significant overhaul to the matchmaker that will be basically akin to remaking the whole thing, as it would have to find matches for each role individually, then balance the whole match after that. Kilgoon also mentioned that they feel like this is less necessary than they originally thought it might be, because you get your main two roles far more often in Smite 2 as a general rule. Of course, there are situations where some players with specific role orders don't get their main role often, like for example if you queue role 1 mid and role 2 support, you'll get support far more often than mid in that case because they are the most and least popular roles respectively. But in general, most players get their main roles way more often in Smite 2, and that's my experience as well as a solo jungle main. It's pretty rare that I get filled into support, and once in a blue moon that I get filled into ADC or mid. I can't remember the exact numbers, but last time they published data on this, I think it was around 90% of the time players were getting one of their top 2 roles. This leads to role-based SR being a bit less necessary, as you get less cases where the enemy solo is a solo main and your solo has it at role 5, for example. I do still think this would be a great improvement to the game personally, but I can also see their side of things where this would be a lot less valuable than it initially seemed when they started Smite 2, and it would also be a lot of work and they would have to rework the whole matchmaking process to implement this. So from a cost-benefit perspective, I can see why they might be less enthusiastic about doing this as an immediate priority. I still think it will be good to have in the game eventually though. Someone asked if they could increase the overall audio of hits from basic attacks and abilities, and Kilgoon said he generally agrees with the sentiment that there isn't enough feedback or oomph on hitting or being hit, but he feels like it's a larger problem than just increasing the audio volume. There was a question of if they could change the gold pile in mid to a camp or something more interesting, and Kilgoon said they are looking at it potentially and they do feel like it's not as exciting as it could be and they're not super happy with it, so it could change in the future. Someone mentioned they see a lot of criticism about Smite 2 being too similar to Smite 1, and do they have anything planned to make the game more majorly different from Smite 1? And Kilgoon said it's hard to find a balance for them, as they frequently see complaints both about the game being too similar to Smite 1 and not worth losing all your gods and skins over, and also a lot of complaints about the game not being enough like Smite and feeling too unfamiliar. And they feel like they're at a reasonable balance right now with some things that are different while retaining the feel of Smite 1. For the record, I personally think they're walking this line quite well. It feels like Smite, but the +1s, aspects, active items, split scaling, infamy, consumables from jungle camps, all that kind of stuff, there's a good amount that differentiates it from Smite 1. They do feel like there are other things they could do in that regard though to make Smite 2 different but better than Smite 1, but they do want to stay focused on being a great third-person action MOBA and not trying to be something they're not, which I think is a good perspective to have on this. Someone asked about model updates as gods come over, and Kilgoon basically said it's on a case-by-case basis. Most of the gods they feel like are mostly fine to bring over with just quality upgrades, but some will definitely get more touch-ups. Hell and Sir Ket were mentioned specifically as sort of older models that will probably get a larger overhaul as they make the move. There was a question of if the in-game solo queue cups are still coming soon, and Kilgoon said yes, they are still working on that in the background, but no ETA on exactly when it will be available. Someone asked if they ever plan to make more spin-offs in the far future if Smite 2 does well, and they said they're always open to it, and there was real discussion in the studio about whether to make a full-fledged Smite Dungeons game similar to the Trials of King Hercules adventure modes from back in the day, but it was around the time they were thinking about making Smite 2 as well, and they decided that Smite 2 was the play instead of that, but they are open to it in the future. And finally, someone asked about the lobby screen updates, like showing teammates models and stuff like that, and Kilgoon said it is still on their radar, but there are some performance issues with that screen that they probably need to address before adding more god models that would make performance even worse. But that's everything discussed on today's Titan Talk. As mentioned earlier this week, there won't be a show on Monday due to the Memorial Day weekend in the US, so the OB11 showcase will be on Wednesday instead, but be sure to subscribe to catch my coverage of that when it drops, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.